que ya viene la revolución, para que se asustan será pa' mejor. Es el pueblo entero el que ya está gritando, ¡viva la revolución!
Iranian nuclear weapons development.
They have turned the island into a communist hellhole.
The experiment in Venezuela has failed completely.
La bestialidad imperialista. Bestialidad que no tiene una frontera determinada ni pertenece a un país determinado. Bestias fueron las hordas hitleristas, como bestias son los norteamericanos hoy, como bestias son los paracaidistas belgas, como bestias fueron los imperialistas franceses en Argelia. Porque es la naturaleza del imperialismo la que bestializa a los hombres, la que la convierte en fieras sedientas de sangre que están dispuestas a degollar, a asesinar, a destruir hasta la última imagen de un revolucionario, de un partidario de un régimen que haya caído bajo su bota o que luche por su libertad. Y la estatua que recuerda a Lumumba, hoy destruida pero mañana reconstruida, nos recuerda también en la historia trágica de ese mártir de la revolución del mundo, que no se puede confiar en el imperialismo, pero ni tantito así, nada.
انهض للثورة والثار انهض للثورة والثار انهض كهبوب الأعصار انهض كهبوب الأعصار وارجم أعداءك بالنار وارجم أعداءك بالنار واهتف بالصوت الهدار واهتف بالصوت الهدار الثورة 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 نهج الأحرار الثورة نهج الأحرار من غزة من قدس العربي من غزة من قدس العربي من أسر النقمة والتعب من أسر النقمة والتعب اخرج كالريح ولا تهبي اخرج كالريح ولا تهبي يا جيل النخوة والغضب يا جيل النخوة والغضب وتدفق 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 نهرا من لهب وتدفق نهرا من لهب انهض من قاعك وانتشري انهض من قاعك وانتشري في الماء الصخر وفي الشجر في الماء الصخر وفي الشجر في أرضك وادخل في المطر في أرضك وادخل في المطر وامضي كالسيف إلى الظفر وامضي كالسيف إلى الظفر وابدأ 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 ميلادك بالحجر وابدأ ميلادك بالحجر انهض للثورة والثار انهض للثورة والثار انهض كهبوب الأعصار انهض كهبوب الأعصار وارجم أعداءك بالنار وارجم أعداءك بالنار واهتف بالصوت الهدار واهتف بالصوت الهدار الثورة 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 نهج الأحرار الثورة نهج الأحرار
What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 88, Unmasking Imperialism, Exposing Imperialist Propaganda in Mainstream Media. Today, Zionist settlers kill and deceive. Long live the solidarity with the Palestinian people. Long live the resistance of all Muslims, of all Arab peoples, of all Global South peoples against Zionism and imperialism. Today, we are exposing Israel's war and lies, and I would have to say there are wars, multiple wars on many fronts, During today's episode, we're going to discuss the mass murder, displacement, detainment, and systematic oppression of Palestinians by Zionist settlers. We expose their deceptive talking points, which serve to victimize themselves and whitewash their crimes. And lastly, we touch on Israel's imperialist aggression against the Islamic world, including the axis of resistance in the Middle East, Iran, the Lebanese resistance, Ansar Allah, Iraq, Yemen, so many other places. And joining me today is somebody who I have a lot of respect for, has a great website, Brother Ali Salaam, editor-in-chief of Basira Press, an Islamic pro-resistance axis research and analysis site that addresses both the material and metaphysical issues of the world. He has an extensive background in independent journalism, which has been a continuous journey of truth-seeking, one that has led him to accept Islam in late 2013. And Brother Ali is joining us from Iran. Thank you so much for coming on, brother. How's everything going on your end? Can you see and hear me okay?
Yeah, thank God I can hear and see you okay finally. You were too kind in the intro. I'm hopeful that the content of my humble and simple website, Basira Press, can be of benefit to people, and hopefully I can provide a different perspective that perhaps people aren't used to hearing, and hopefully that they'll be able to benefit from this discussion as well. And perhaps that the enemies of mankind will shiver a little bit more in their boots from this discussion as well.
Most definitely, brother. Most definitely. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Because you have a very interesting story. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and tell us a little bit about Basira Press, like what it's about, what it stands for, how you decided to start it and launch it. Because it's no joke. It's very serious work. And for those of you who are watching and listening, here is the website, basirapress.org. A really great website. The top story right now, Iranian scientists bombshell revelations on COVID and other stuff. Really amazing content here. Just a variety of topics that I love, because it's not just all like politics and this and that. It's lifestyle. It's like psychology. So tell us about yourself and how you started this website.
So I first got involved in journalism when I went to university in 2010, and I only stayed there for about 2 semesters. Then I decided to drop out and pursue broadcast journalism in school since about 2011. It was actually an elective that I chose when I first went to university in 2010, and that was something that just infatuated me more than all my other studies. So I devoted my time entirely to it. Now my political positions back then were quite laughable compared to what I have now, but it was a journey of truth seeking. So I actually my family background is 100% Ashkenazi Jewish from Russian, Ukrainian national background. And so my father was it's a complicated story, and I really don't know what my family's true politics is anymore. But my father was hardcore Zionist.
Wow.
And basically, viewed people who are outside the Jewish race as inferior. But my perspective is not to spite my parents or not to spite my former religion or whatever these things. The truth is the truth, and that's what Allah has guided me to, thankfully, away from the darkness that I used to be in. But this was a slow process, and so I started out. My first kind of divergence from what I was told was conventional wisdom by my parents or by the mainstream Zionist media or all these different types of things was the first thing that was kind of like my divergence was like libertarianism and Ron Paul, which in hindsight is a little bit cringe, but it's the natural like progression, and that's why as much as I have this like, if I was to go back in time, I'd see myself, would I smack myself in the face, or would I be gentle and understanding that there's potential here, and there's a chance, there's still a spark of humanity left in this very wretched person. So I thank God for everything and pushing me in the right direction. So for a while, I was working with and contributing to Mint Press News, and then to the American Herald Tribune, which was actually shut down by the FBI for some reason. I don't know why. They claim, they always make some claims up. So that was for several years. I accepted Islam in 2013 after I started kind of like as like a normie libertarian, but then, for example, things like big pharma and the censorship of cures for cancer, that was like a big thing that especially because like a lot of libertarians, they'd be like, we hate the government, bro, but it's not that evil. It's not that evil. There's no way they can do these types of things. So you see them like support big pharma or support these different types of things, or say that, well, 9/11 happened exactly how they say it. We hate the government, but we believe it's official story on 9/11. All these other kinds of like cop-outs, on their part, which is contrary to the truth. I wanted to find the truth wherever it lied, and these things were there, and it's hard to disprove many of the things about 9/11 or Monsanto or all these different types of things, or the Federal Reserve and the Rothschild family and how we live in one big system of blood sucking. And when you get to these kind of more deeper issues about the true, like deep evil about how the system works, it can be a little bit depressing at times. And so that's, I guess, where spirituality came in, and having faith in a creator that's bigger than all these seemingly insurmountable tyrants who have all this wealth and power. They're nothing, and they have been humiliated, and they're currently being humiliated in like the most miserable way now. It's pretty epic to watch, and hopefully we get to see some more fireworks of their collapse, inshallah.
Most definitely. Thank you for sharing that. It's such an amazing, inspirational story. I really have a lot of respect for people who come from a totally different background and are able to make that shift. For you to see firsthand, I grew up in New York, and I grew up with a lot of Zionist Jews in my neighborhood. And a lot of them, just the way that they referred to Muslims or Arabs or non-Jews in many ways was really chauvinistic, very like arrogant, I felt. And it was just very off-putting.
It's racism. There's no other way to put it.
And most definitely. And it was a shame too, because like if you actually look at the knowledge or the information that is talked about, is very interesting. But what is very interesting to me about Islam, and in particular Shia Islam, is its horizontalism, its democracy. You don't have to be of a certain type of person or status or hierarchy to seek the truth. Anybody can seek the truth, and also the politics of especially the Shia Islamic world and also Palestine, resisting empire, resisting colonialism and imperialism, calling out, also like the Saudis and the Gulf monarchies that are in collusion with the Zionist imperialist powers. So that has always been kind of like appealing to me. And I started learning about the Iranian Revolution. I started learning about the Lebanese resistance. And I was just, wow, like so inspired to see like so many amazing things that they were taking part in. And so, that's kind of like my connection to it. My political tradition obviously is more on the left, but I think that one of my kind of disagreements within the left is that even though I'm a leftist, a lot of people in the postmodern first world left, they really shy away from talking about things like 9/11 and Zionism and Monsanto and the Rothschilds, because once you get into those topics, like you said, you get into some really dark territory, and that's kind of like, I feel like that's the limit of a lot of like leftist discourse, where it's like once you get into those areas, people get so scared, and that's why I like your website, man, because you touch on all those topics from a pursuit of truth and knowledge, no matter where it takes you. So, I really respect you and your website for that.
Well, thank you. And that's actually one of the articles we have on our site is about actually how the CIA is responsible for much of the Western left. And a lot of them are actually, from the Trotskyite school of thought. The Western left is basically a creation to create a bulwark within the socialist movement against the so-called totalitarian regimes of the USSR, DPRK, Cuba, basically anybody that isn't like an anarchist hippie commune, as if like just a bunch of people hula hooping all day is going to stand up to, the biggest nuclear armed military machine on the world.
For sure.
It's a little bit laughable that they take themselves seriously, and they usually like. And I didn't create this term before, the Kurdish Narnia of Rojava.
Kurdish Narnia. Yeah, most definitely.
Which is directly funded by the Pentagon. So these links are there, and if people want to be truly anti-establishment, well, they can't adopt the establishment co-opted ideology and think that they're being revolutionary. So this is an invitation to those who are genuine, who are just among the rank and file, to think a little bit deeply, and if they believe in socialism, try for a more authentic version. For the people who are aware of what they're doing, then mostly for them there's no hope. So Basira Press was actually started this year because I wanted to delve into these deeper issues with an interview, as you showed before, with an Iranian scientist on the issue of I don't know if this will get you banned from YouTube, but talking about coronavirus and things like that, and many other related issues to that, and the response to the whole thing. And he's a genetic scientist, and he talked about his own experience with genetic vaccines and how he doesn't trust the rollout. Nobody would publish the article. So it's almost as if the site kind of like happened unintentionally. But all praise is due to Allah that actually has blossomed into something very wonderful, and I'm blessed to be able to do this, but also puts a little bit of a responsibility in my hands. So I'm trying to make sure that it's a place for people to think a little bit more deeply, and it's a place that sees somebody like myself as I was like 10 years ago, and tries to be open and seek to lift people up rather than push people down, and not put everything on everybody at once. And I think that's because I don't have the most time to contribute to it every day, or even other authors that write for it. So it allows it to be very gradual, even just in the amount of content that is put out. So I think it's a digestible format, and I hope that people benefit from it.
Most definitely. And everybody who's watching and listening, please go and show some love to Basira Press, basirapress.org. Shout out to everybody who's watching, listening. Ewoks Unhinged, really interesting to learn about the anti-imperialism around Shia Islam. What's up, My Written Voice? Shout out to Tay. Shout out to Cobra Commander. Shout out to everybody who's watching, listening. If you have any comments or questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, and we'll discuss them. But today we are discussing Israel and their wars and crimes and lies against humanity, especially our Muslim sisters and brothers and the Palestinian people. What I want to do is I want to play a clip. This is sort of a roundup of the latest atrocities committed by Israel, some of the murders going on, the raids, attacks. So I'm going to play this, and we'll get some reaction from Brother Ali Salaam and others who are on the chat.
The Israeli military released a video of the airstrike that struck an apartment building in Gaza and killed a senior commander from the armed group Islamic Jihad. Israel said it launched several missiles as part of a crackdown, which started with the arrest of another senior leader in the occupied West Bank earlier this week.
What is the fault of this child, and what did she do to get killed? Was she firing rockets or fighting?
But on the ground, people in Gaza mourned one of the victims of the missile strike, a 5-year-old girl. And scenes of victims covered in dust and blood have sparked vows of revenge from Hamas and Islamic Jihad. After the initial strikes, Israel said it hit other targets in Gaza, killing a number of Islamic Jihad fighters. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas issued a statement condemning the Israeli strikes and demanding they stop, but Israel says it's defending its national security.
Israel carried out a precise counter-terror operation against an immediate threat. Our fight is not with the people of Gaza. Islamic Jihad is an Iranian proxy that wants to destroy the state of Israel and kill innocent Israelis. The head of Islamic Jihad is in Tehran as we speak.
Israeli soldiers rammed through the doors of darkened offices, rifled through documents, and confiscated property in Ramallah. 7 non-governmental organizations were raided, including those serving Palestinian women and children and providing legal assistance. On their way out, the soldiers sealed doors and declared the offices closed. Employees say these are humanitarian organizations helping Palestinians living under Israeli occupation.
We don't take our legality from the occupying power. Our legality is coming from the nature of our work. We are working in law, and also it comes from our people, and it comes from the victims, the Palestinian victims. This is, our legitimacy.
The Israeli defense minister designated the non-governmental institutions as terrorist organizations.
The body of Shireen Abu Akleh is carried through the town of Jenin in the occupied West Bank. The veteran Al Jazeera reporter was shot dead while covering a raid by Israeli forces. Another journalist was also shot and injured. The Palestinian Health Ministry says they were hit by bullets fired by Israeli soldiers.
We made ourselves clear to the army and the passers-by, indicating that we are the press. Then within seconds there was the first shot. I told them that we are being targeted, we are being shot at. I turned and found Shireen on the ground.
The Israeli military says its forces came under attack in Jenin and that they fired back.
There was no exchange of fire, so there is no possibility whatsoever that a Palestinian have shot Shireen Abu Akleh. The Israeli army always uses these excuses to cover up the crimes they are committing against Palestinians, including Palestinian journalists.
Israeli raids in the occupied West Bank have intensified in recent weeks after a series of attacks inside Israel. The Jenin refugee camp has become a stronghold for resistance against the Israeli occupation. Shireen Abu Akleh had worked for Al Jazeera for 20 years. Colleagues described her as brave, kind, and a voice of Palestinians.
So a lot of stuff going on. The 100 days. I saw. Shout out to Holly in the chat today. 100 days since the murder of Shireen Abu Akleh. The murder of Shireen, the bombing of innocent people, innocent Palestinians in Gaza, families, little kids, by the Zionist entity known as Israel, and also Israel rounding up, arresting, detaining, raiding the offices of activists, of Palestinian activists. So in every sense, right? But we're talking about mass murder, displacement, detainment, and so many other forms of oppression that the state of Israel is carrying out against Palestine. Brother Ali Salaam, your thoughts and reaction to all of this?
Well, first of all, obviously it's the natural right and the divine right of Palestinians to use whatever they can to resist against those that want to carry out very ungodly actions against their people, which has been ongoing, for 1948 and even before 1948. So the idea that there's some kind of a victimhood here is just, it's the biggest hypocrisy and the biggest lie that most people are sold on. The Zionist occupation is an active military occupation. People who go there, whether they go there as settlers or anything like that, they're pretty much enlisted in the military. And even if they're living a civilian life, they're in the reserve. And even if they're living, even at that, they're still, their civilian life is backed up by a brutal military occupation. So the idea that there are civilians in the Zionist entity is a complete farce. There are only military occupiers, and anyone who is there is consciously knows this. I mean, they shouldn't fool themselves what they're getting into. They know what they're getting into. Perhaps the only really innocent people are the children who don't know any better, who've been brainwashed by their parents, but that the fault lies on the parents for endangering their children in such an irresponsible manner, and not in the Palestinians who are, resisting through armed resistance, which is their divine right and their natural right. The idea that Palestinians should just rely on the UN, the useless nations,
Yep.
or NGOs or any of these outfits, it's not going to work. Any of the work outside of armed resistance should be complementary towards armed resistance. So this, and the inhumanity of this regime and this occupation only lends credibility to their moral stance. That they shoot and kill journalists. That even NGOs, which by themselves will not pose a threat to the Zionist regime, still they hate the sunlight. They hate the transparency. So they want to shut them down. It's just showing the ugly face, and so there should be pride in Palestinian Islamic Jihad. And so what if they get support from Iran, because Israel gets support from the United States? So let's not play like this hypocritical game. The truth is on the side of the Palestinians. The righteousness is on the side of the Palestinians. And if they want to reach out to someone who also believes in standing up for righteousness and supporting those who are facing a seemingly insurmountable monster, backed up by another seemingly insurmountable monster, which is the United States, they have every right to do that, and that shouldn't be a source of controversy.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think it's a great point what you're mentioning about how the Zionist media, they make it seem like, oh my God, Iran is funding these protests and it's this external aggression. None of it has to do with what Israel has been doing to the Palestinian people. It's all just based on some external forces and external pressure. And it's this constant victim narrative that comes from the Israeli Zionist media that portrays themselves as the underdog. And this is something that I see very constantly. Like, I see this all the time where people, I mentioned this on another stream recently, that people naturally want to root for the underdog. People always, when you're watching a movie or you see like the kid being bullied in class, or you see somebody who's smaller or weaker getting attacked or harassed, you always root for the underdog, because just in our human nature, we want to defend people who are oppressed. And so what a lot of the Zionist media does is that they take that narrative and they subvert it for their purposes. They portray themselves as David, and they portray the Palestinians as Goliath. And this is something that even when we go to and talk about some of the biblical references and texts where Zionism gets this from, and how they call the Philistines and the Palestinians, right? Even though they call themselves alien residents who don't belong to the land of Canaan, they still portray themselves as underdogs. They still portray themselves as victims, even though they have the largest military power behind their back, the U.S., even though they have banking institutions, trade, media, weapons, everything. They still believe that they are the underdog. And you look at Palestinians, they have sticks, rocks, they have nothing. They don't have weapons. They don't have anything. And yet they're portraying the Palestinians.
Thankfully, now they do have weapons.
Right. Oh, yeah, no, exactly. And that's the thing. Like, there's so much, the tide is turning, I feel like, where Palestine is getting so much love and international solidarity. And I'm happy to see that, because, it wasn't always the case, especially in the 90s. Like, saying that you were pro-Palestine was, a very dangerous thing. So one thing I want to do is I want to play a clip. This is, and I know, shout out to everybody who's watching and listening, by the way. I know one of the biggest issues as well that's going on is the displacement, the actual settlers who are coming in and taking land from the Palestinian people. So what I want to do is I just want to play a clip. These are some of the settlers who are going into Palestine and displacing Palestinian families. And then we'll talk a little bit more about what that means for the Palestinian people.
يشبه حياليم قام شو الو لا ما هو بو لا ما قاتم لي بو كان يرزي متام من الصبا الصبا رسل خمام الشطح بسدر ان بايا يعني يجد لك نحن عليه لا ما تسحيك لا ما تسحيك لا ما تسحيك لا ما تسحيك زوز يلا زوز من بو زوز يلا زوزو سباي سيلي انت خايف لي شمر زوز زوز جنجي زوز زوز بايتي
אתה לא מקשיב לי? אתה לא מקשיב לי? אני לא אטפל.
לא, תדבר עכשיו.
אין בעיה, אני פה כדי לטפל, אבל אתה לא תצטרך עליי.
חיילים? בסדר. לא, זה הבית שלהם. חצי סנטי אחורה לא חוזרים, אתה יודע? חצי סנטי. אנחנו בוא נשאר.
בסדר? תן לנו לטפל בזה.
בסדר, אנחנו נעלה לשם גם. בסדר, אתם מגיעים בו, אנחנו נעלה לשם. בסדר. זה הבעייתי גם. כל הבעייתים בו. אתה הגבול של... תראה, אנחנו לא הולכים מבוא, לא הולכים. איפה?
הנה, שטח צבאי סגור.
איפה? על בית שלנו?
כן.
תקשיב, אני אגיד לך, גוש... הוא הפרובוקטיבי, אנחנו כאילו...
מה זה הם בבית שלנו? מה זה? שומעים הם בבית שלנו? נכנסים לנו לבית?
لك لمتى غد مشفيل لك لمتى لك غد مشفيل غد مشفيل غد لمتى غد لمتى I'm taping you. I'm taping you. I'm taping you. I'm taping you. I'm taping your faces. I'm taping your faces. I'm taping your faces. I am taping your faces. Guys, they are arresting two guys now. They're beating them verbally and they're arresting them.
Jacob, you know this is not your house.
Yes, but if I go, you don't go back. So what's the problem? Why are you yelling at me? I didn't do this. I didn't do this.
But
it's easy to yell at me, but I didn't do this.
You are stealing my house.
And if I don't steal it, someone else is going to steal it.
No one is allowed to steal it, ya ammi.
Here in Sheikh Jarrah, like many other neighborhoods all across Jerusalem, we are facing the imminent threat of forced displacement at the hands of billionaire-backed settler organizations working in collusion with the Israeli government and a judicial system that's inherently colonial. In the next few weeks, hundreds of us could be rendered homeless, including myself and my family.
Crazy stuff, man. Every time I watch videos like that, my heart beats like crazy, my impulse, my adrenaline rushes, and it's just so infuriating to see that stuff. Brother Ali Salaam is going to go change his Wi-Fi for a second. He's going to be back. But if you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to throw it in the chat, and we'll talk a little bit about them. Shout out to Comrade Libre, Free Palestine. Shout out to Cobra Commander. This guy, I was just talking about this. This guy flew there and took over an Arab fucking house. Yeah, it's crazy. Seeing these videos is just insane to me, and it shows the fundamental nature of settler colonialism, where somebody goes to your land. Like you saw in those videos, right? You saw the look of disgust that was in their face, in the Zionist face, where they're like, one of the women actually called the Palestinian guy a piece of trash, and the other guy was throwing rocks at him and spitting. Imagine right now, it's Friday night. Right now, somebody comes into your apartment or to your house. They knock on your door. They bust in your door. They try to beat you up. They try to kill you. And because they're not able to, they take over a majority of your apartment or your house. And then they call the cops on you. And they're saying, hey, this person's in my apartment right now. This person's in my house, even though it's your house, right? And when the cops get there, they act like the victim. They start calling you names. They give you dirty looks. They start throwing stuff at you. And so it's just the psychology of settler colonialism is just so perfectly embodied by these clips. And so I'm every time I share these stuff, I always try to take a mental note as well that this is what we're fighting against. We're fighting against this horrible parasitic mentality of settler colonialism, of Zionism, that sees the Palestinian people, that sees the Muslims and Arab peoples, and all peoples as below. So we do have Brother Ali back. No, the CIA did not cut him off. It's just Wi-Fi issues. But Brother Ali, we shared that clip of the settlers and just the look. We're talking about the look of disgust and just the racism, like you said, right, that they have. Like, why don't you tell us a little bit about that, like the psychology behind settler colonialism and Zionism?
So to go a little bit deep, actually, at least in Islam, we believe that the first creation to do this, to have this mentality, was Iblis or Lucifer, the devil himself. So this is like a very devilish mentality. Basically, we believe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Adam, alayhi salam, and then ordered the angels to prostrate him. But Lucifer was among the jinns, which is like a spiritual entity, not the same as the angels, but his status was that he was kind of placed among them. But he was a hypocrite. He was arrogant. His, the idea that he was like this servant of God and everything like that was just a big show, and it was a way for him to ingratiate himself. And so when it came to actually doing and serving, the creator that he claimed to, he said, no, Adam is made out of clay and I'm made out of fire, and that's a superior makeup. But he didn't do anything to earn that makeup. It's just like something that happened to him. What really matters is what he does with the life that he's been given. And he clearly didn't do such a good job at that. So basically any group that has that similar mentality has the devil mentality. We believe also that over time certain religions have been distorted, some to more degrees than others. The idea that most people don't know that Muslims also believe in Moses and Jesus. As we believe that all the prophets come from the same line and serve the same religion, just building upon the foundation of what the other one had built upon. So obviously the religion of Moses was distorted into a religion of racism, and if he was to be alive today, he would be smacking some people upside the head, and he would be on the side of Islamic jihad. He would be inside Gaza with the commanders of the resistance, and he would be with Lebanon. He would be with Iran, and he would be with all of the powers that are standing up against the real pharaoh of today, which is the Zionist regime, which is the United States, which is the UK. And many of these kind of like globalist organizations like the UN or all these types of entities. And on that note, I wouldn't say that, for example, the occupation of Palestine and the resistance against the occupation is like the way the media constantly like portrays it. You know, when they refer to it as a religious conflict, they do so in like a very Orientalist kind of like postmodern Enlightenment lens, which is that to be religious is to be like pea-brained, and to be, you know, it's just a bunch of people with small brains hitting each other, and that's so it's not that. But you know, when you mention, you know, the juxtaposition of, like, for example, the philosophy of Shia Islam, or why even, you know, there exists such a movement is precisely because we have the very, you know, deeper, more intellectual understanding of how religion should be, because you know, we are given intellect by our Creator. We're given also a deep spiritual capacity by our Creator. So when we reflect deeply on the situation of the world, on the creation and everything like that, will a human being who has a heart, a human being who is humble before their Creator, will naturally come to these conclusions. And if they have such an inspiring story as the story of Imam Hussein, alayhi salam, and the story of Ashura and Karbala, you know, it is the roots, or the roots of the resistance today goes back to Karbala, goes back to Ashura, and standing up for what is right. You know, the story of Imam Hussein wasn't just a bunch of pea-brained individuals hitting each other over the head for just like a seat of power. Imam Hussein himself said that he's not seeking this uprising for the sake of a worldly throne, for the sake of some kind of status or title. He is doing it to establish divine justice on this earth, and to remove devilry from all centers of power. So, you know, to establish a government. We're not like, we definitely don't ascribe to anarchism like some of these hippie CIA-backed leftists in the United States. We believe that politics is a vehicle just like any other vehicle and any other tool. Unfortunately, it's, you know, there are some tools which attract the most rotten and you know, ill-begotten human beings on this planet, but that doesn't mean that it's impossible to do otherwise. And so the ugly face we see through all these actions, whether it be these settlers coming in, arrogantly stealing people's homes, like, hey, I'm doing it. You know, if somebody else didn't do it, or if I didn't do it, somebody else would do it. You know, these people, if they don't repent, they're going to face the humiliation that they're currently facing, which we saw recently. Islamic Jihad is is relatively smaller than Hamas, but I think perhaps the strategic intention of Hamas staying away from the previous battle was to show that, and this is what Imam Khamenei, the leader of the Islamic Revolution in Iran, said, that a single Palestinian resistance organization can subdue the enemy by itself. Now imagine if they're all together, as we saw last year with the Sword of Jerusalem operation. You know, obviously it was more than one organization acting at the same time. So they're being humiliated on so many fronts. And, you know, there's the idea that these powers will last forever. They will be among the pages of history that are looked down upon, you know, just as the same as everybody remembers the name of Hussein. Millions of people around the world, but nobody cares about Yazid, who was the tyrant of the time, who opposed Imam Hussein. And no one's going to care about the Zionists in the future, other than a learning lesson of what happens when you follow in the footsteps of the devil himself.
That's such a great way to put it, man. I'm glad you said that. And for me, when I think about Zionism and the chauvinistic, imperialist, settler colonial attitude that they have against Muslims or Palestinians and Arabs, it reminds me of something that is satanic, something that is evil, something that is, you know, in the Bible and in religious texts, they talk about, you know, you reap what you sow, right? And it's like in this regard, like they're just creating something out of nothing. And it also ties back in to what the founders of Zionism, Theodor Herzl, the Rothschilds, that was their philosophy and approach. Like you have the Rothschild family that were making millions and billions of dollars, making something out of nothing, right? This magic money squares that are these idols that they worship, right? This religion that they create out of thin air just from media and spells. Like, it's literally witchcraft and spells that they, you look at Edward Bernays and other Zionists who pioneered propaganda for the state of Israel and public relations to the United States. He was able to use TV and media and certain images to create spells to get women to smoke cigarettes, right? To ingest poison and toxics. You have the Rothschilds creating the opium crisis, the Kadoorie family, so many others, right? That we can go into.
The Sassoon family specifically, I believe, in China. Yeah. It's this that goes back to like this spiritual, like deep evil of the banking system. In the Holy Quran, it says that those who practice in usury, which is they limit it to the definition of interest, but I think it's much more than just interest. It's like a system of blood sucking. It's like a system where you can't do anything without taking out interest. You can't do anything without taking out loans. You literally can't live without being drowned in debt. And even the system itself is like that. Like, there's always going to be more debt than money supply, just by the nature of it. So it's always a losing game for the average person. Even some of the people on the higher up levels, like, they think they're comfortable, but when it comes down, they're going to be cannibalized. And I think like the way that the Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos and all these kind of like top billionaires capitalize on the coronavirus policies. I think a lot of even some of the higher up, not so rich, but not as them, but still very, very well to do. Some of them got screwed big time. So if you're not like if you're not in the 1% or even less than 1%, like you're going to be screwed at some point in the future. So this is just one of the many tools of oppression that they have at their disposal. And it's not just affecting the Palestinians; it's affecting people around the world, even people in America. That are barely they work the same amount of hours or even more now, but they can afford less. And the same banking system, that creates the system. All the profits are going to the families that donate to the Zionist regime and donate to the Zionist entity. And so that makes like the American establishment and the Israeli establishment and kind of like these global bankers one and the same, and they're all serving the same satanic agenda, and they want to destroy any righteous people who are opposed to their agenda, such as the Honorable Palestinian Resistance or the Islamic Republic of Iran. And the problem I think with some of the activism for Palestine is that it's kind of like relies on this this idea that we need to have Palestinians be victims, the idea that they can be victorious, the idea that they can actually win, is something that a lot of careerists and some of them maybe even worse than careerists, but people who actually want to perpetuate the occupation while positing themselves as helpers of Palestinian people, they don't want to see this happen. So whatever is the reasoning, those of us who are sincere for supporting Palestine, but are still discovering, it takes time. We're learning more issues. I myself, I'm not a product of something that just happened overnight. If we want to be sincere, we should definitely support that, which will actually result in a change for the Palestinian people. And like I said at the beginning, if it's not complementary towards armed resistance, it should be reconsidered and readjusted, if not abandoned entirely. So we need to make sure that there is a path to victory away from all of this. Otherwise, if we just want to fight the enemy with two arms tied behind our back, that's we're just going to be stuck in the same cycle, and the world is going to be stuck in the same path of misery. and we need to get out of it. And it's a divine promise that we will get out of it. But there's no magic tricks. Any movement against devilish tyrants on the earth, whether it's recent history or even times when prophets of God or representatives of God have done so, they didn't rely on just like sitting on their hands. They actively moved towards it. So we should be actively moving towards this goal, so that hopefully we can put ourselves out of a job of being activists or journalists or anything like that, and so that there can actually be this big shift in the world, so that we can actually work towards improving the world, and actually coming up with these once we get rid of these blood-sucking tyrants, we'll have room to actually concentrate on things that actually uplift people. And what can be achieved through that is not even in our biggest imagination. So let's remove those obstacles and let people live decent lives.
Most definitely. And speaking about allowing people to lead decent lives, there's this one guy, his name is Morty Klein. He's the president or the leader of the Zionist Organization of America. This guy is a fucking nut job. So excuse my language. This guy is crazy.
No, it's okay.
This guy, like, he's talking about war. He's so aggressive in how he talks about supporting Zionism. So I'm going to play this clip and we'll talk more about also the Zionist lobby in the United States, because he's based in the U.S., right? So this is an important wing or arm of Zionism is the U.S., especially the right-wing fundamentalist Christian wing. So we're going to play this and talk a little bit more about that.
My basic message: we dare not, as Mr. Beck reminds us, ignore the truth of the ongoing Arab-Islamic war against Israel, Jews, and the West. I am personally getting sick and tired of leaders around the world continuously saying what some of us might want to hear, but not the truth which we need to hear. They keep saying, we can have peace in the Middle East, just give a little more land, a little more money to the Arabs, a little more restraint, a little more appeasement, they tell us. And this will end the war against Israel. Well, now let me state my opinion of the truth. The Arabs do not want peace with the Jewish state of Israel. The Arabs never wanted peace with the Jewish state of Israel. And let me tell you something else. As much as we all want Israel to have peace with the Arabs, Israel can and will survive and thrive without peace with the Arabs, as I've had since 1948. American leaders, American Jewish leaders and Israeli leaders should remind the world. The Arabs were offered a state in 1937. They said no. In 1948, they said no. From 48 to 67, they controlled all of Judea and Samaria, Gaza, East Jerusalem, the Sinai and the Golan. They never created a state. In 2000, Ehud Barak offered them a state on 95% of the land. They said no. 2008, Ehud Olmert offered them a state on 98% of the land. They said no. What does it take for us to understand? They want Israel's destruction, not peace with the Jewish state of Israel.
So that's just one guy from the Zionist.
That is a real terrorist right there.
Oh yeah. What are your thoughts or reaction to that?
Well, he's partially right in a sense, but you have to realize that Israel's the evildoer, so you cannot have peace with the evildoer, and this is their false dichotomy. They like to say that they're just like an enemy of the Jewish people because Jews are like of a certain race and it's a racial issue. No, I don't care if we're purple aliens from Mars or Eskimos or Norwegians or whatever. They are who they are, and they're doing this. And so it's the divine right of the people to reclaim their own land 100% of it, not 95% of it, because it's the idea of recognizing an illegitimate entity that is stealing their land and seeks to expand. The idea that they don't want to expand, or that they'll just be happy with the so-called Tel Aviv or these other enclaves, is not the case. The fact that they expanded into Lebanon, what does their flag even mean? And the two lines are the Nile and the Euphrates. So this is one big joke. The idea that rather it's in the reverse. It's the Jewish supremacists who are occupying Palestine do not want peace with anybody in that region, and perhaps even in this world, because they have this, as we mentioned, this kind of like Luciferian mentality that they are superior based on their race, and that's the biggest hypocrisy. Anybody who opposes their murder and oppression and actions is equal a racist. When I don't care what is the makeup of their skin or how they were born. If you're acting in this certain way, it should be condemned. And if you change, then there's a potential for what's it called? Forgiveness, but it has to be sincere. And those criminals who are truly hardened criminals, there shouldn't be any forgiveness for them. So the idea that and this goes back to that dichotomy I was stating further, like the idea that Islam is just like this pea-brain religion, we're just at war with the rest for no reason. Well, it reverses everything, and even like who is the good guy and who is the bad guy. This is about the actions of the West. This is about the action of the Zionist regime. And as I mentioned before, any issue that Muslims Muslims who are deep in their religion, not these kind of block-headed Wahhabis who see everything very literally, but Muslims very deeply intellectual, as the religion should make them, will understand that the issue with any issue with the Jewish religion is not based on race. So we're not just actively seeking out Jews just to go after Jews for no reason other than they're Jews, and all this nonsense that the Zionist lobby has really brainwashed the world into think that this is just a conflict that will never end, and they're just even if a Jew is sitting in his house doing nothing, a Muslim is going to want to try to. That's not the case. If someone acts decently according to the real religion of Moses, whether they remain as a Jew or become a Christian or become a Muslim or whatever, there will be no issue. But the very essence of the Zionist occupation is a military occupation. So there's no way to be moral while living on somebody else's land, even if they're one of these so-called pro-peace leftists. There's no or whatever Israelis. They're just the occupier with the smiley face. So no matter what they say or what they do, as long as they are sitting and parking their rear end on somebody else's land, then they are liable for those people who are the natural owners of that land to do something about it. So his entire mentality is warped, and if the occupation ends, then there will be no problem. The idea that Muslims just want to, if they ever see a Jew, they're just gonna stab them. It's ridiculous. If the Europeans had that kind of baggage where they viewed the Jewish issue as an ethnic issue, so it doesn't matter what their actions are or whatever, if they convert to another religion or if they just act according to the way Moses truly was, and they abandon this kind of racial supremacy that is found in some of the texts that they have. That's the Europeans' baggage. Do not project that onto the Islamic world, because for us, we just want to uphold the real religion of Moses, and there are many Jewish people who have converted to Islam. Whether it be myself or other people, and they've abandoned that past and that satanic mentality, and they act righteously, and they support godly causes, and some of them even support the Palestinian armed resistance, like Tali Fahima, who converted to Islam many years ago. So, you know, and even like the war with the West, it's like, you know, we don't believe in targeting innocent people. In fact, we see the Western people as victims of the system, you know, and not just when it comes to the material policies of oppression, like the usury or all these other different issues when it comes to the way police crack down on people, or whether it comes to all these different things. It's the very like vapid and empty nature of Western culture as well, that has like completely just about consumerism and materialism, no room for anything deeper about the human life. Like, this is robbing people of happiness. You know, the most antidepressant addicted people are the people of the West. You know, with the highest amount of social problems is the people of the West, and you know that they want to sell us on this social model that is causing the most unhappiness, that is causing the most broken homes, that is causing all these problems. You know, if we're at war at the West, we're trying to save the people of the West, and this is not a military war. You know, if a Muslim person who lives in the West is doing their duty, they would actually try to help people through showing their moral character, through explaining people why the philosophy of like postmodernity and liberalism is bad for people's souls. So, you know, if we're, you know, our war against the West, you know, is not something like, you know, oh, and again, they use the propaganda of so-called terrorism, which they created. They created Al-Qaeda, they created Daesh, they created ISIS, and 9/11, you know, was a false flag, and they have all these false flags. So the idea that we want to attack innocent civilians is nonsense. No, the only place that the West is getting treated with force of arms is in West Asia, where they're militarily occupying, you know, or not Afghanistan anymore, but now Iraq and Syria, and you know, fewer and fewer places, thankfully, as they continue to be humiliated. But when it comes to the actual West, there's no violent threat against the people of the West. There's only a threat against their mentality, which is even destroying themselves. You know, the connection to the temporal realm has left so many empty hearts in the West, and they fill it with even more temporal stuff like drugs and alcohol and everything like that.
Yep.
And that creates all kinds of social problems. You know, they're human beings just like everybody else. And a mother who loses her son to an overdose from drugs imported by the CIA into the streets of the U.S. Is certainly going to feel as much pain as anyone else around the world. And if they were to have a more meaningful life, people wouldn't seek to destroy their lives through these temporary addictions. So maybe we have the answer for the West, and terrorists like Morty Klein is seeking to keep the people of the West oppressed, so they're dumb and docile like zombies, and they go and keep donating to the Zionist regime.
Dude, that's such a great point, and I think that I'm glad you mentioned everything you did, because I think part of the system of Anglo-Zionism and imperialism, they want us to be drugged up. They want us to be consuming indecent material, to OnlyFans and porn. They want us to be distracted. They want us to be isolated from family. Like, especially you look at the Zionist influence of postmodernism and the left. Like the Frankfurt School, a lot of these Zionist types funded this postmodern idea that the family unit is bad, that structure is bad, that anything organized is bad. And you look at also even like the painkillers. You look at the Sackler family. That's one of the creators of OxyContin.
The opioid crisis.
You know, yeah, and you see the opioid crisis, and you know the Sackler family donates a crap ton of money to universities in Israel for biomedical research. So you have a lot of Israeli companies that are creating these drugs that are getting people hooked up, just like the Rothschilds did in the 1800s, right, with their opium. Just like a lot of the bootleggers did, the bottle alcohol distribution. You know, and the one thing that I learned about Islam that I found to be really beautiful, actually it helped me to stop drinking alcohol. So check this, right? This year, actually this week, marks 4 years of being completely sober alcohol. So I haven't had a sip of alcohol in 4 years.
Congratulations, my brother. That's a huge 1 year out of the darkness. It's so illogical. It's like, imagine if like punching yourself in the face was like a cool thing to do, and everybody would go to parties and like punch themselves in the face. And if you didn't punch yourself in the face, it's like,
why is that guy not punching himself in the face? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, and it's like all the largest corporations, like alcohol is like a huge culture, and it keeps people stupid, it keeps people dumbed down. It's just one of the many bread and circuses that exist, and it's ironic that like while like the Islamic Revolution is neither capitalist nor Marxist. We align with, obviously we believe that capitalism is the greater evil. So we align with many socialist governments of the world because we can't force Islam on other people. And so the Islamic government is for us who chose it. But, other people they believe that this is like their mode of overcoming the arrogant powers, our goal is to support them regardless of the minor disagreements. And even like among different countries, there's different like interpretations of it. So while maybe at the early Bolshevik Revolution was hostile to Christianity and Islam, especially from the Trotskyite wing, which was later purged by Stalin, who implemented very many pro-family policies, which many of these CIA Western leftists absolutely hate, and they view it as like authoritarianism that should be like rebelled against. You have like, especially in Latin America and other parts of the world, like family is very, something that's important to the society. And even like the slogan of Nicaragua is like Christian or like socialism and Christianity. May not be getting it 100% correctly, but they see that like the real teachings of the religion is against the oppressor and everything like that. So when right-wing people like in America refer to the Frankfurt School as cultural Marxism, it's a very big cope because they were co-opted by the biggest capitalist powers in the West. They were working for the CIA, and they are working for, and we can honestly call it cultural capitalism because all these various things that they implement in postmodernism encourages consumerism, encourages selfishness, and it ties people's uniqueness to what they consume, to the products they consume, or to various things that are like you have to buy, rather than your spiritual identity, the state of your soul, which is accumulated through your deeds, which are not bought, which are done through your blood and sweat and tears and sacrifices, and withstanding all the pressure to be corrupt in this world. That is where the human being's true identity lies. So the American, as you mentioned, the American Anglo-Zionist system is keen on like pulling people away from what is their true nature and what will actually like give them a real sense of self, and they seek to export that to the global South, particularly because they know that people like Ziad Nakhala, the Secretary General of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, or Qasem Soleimani, or Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, or the Ansarullah resistance movement in Yemen, they come from a place where their character is shaped by the leadership of their father and the mercy and love of their mother. It's like the key ingredients, the yin and the yang. If they were to tear everything apart and just atomize everything into completely like individualistic society, like American liberalism dictates, then they would have such an easy way to plow through the areas of the world that they want to plow through, whether it be Palestine or Iraq or Syria or Iran. And everybody would be their plaything, and nobody would be disciplined enough to really organize themselves. And I learned this, when I lived in the United States, when I tried working with the Western left. Not only just forget about their ideology and that they believe that like Russia is equally as imperialistic to the U.S. or Iran is equally as imperialistic to the U.S. even just when it comes to organizing, they're so selfish. They're so interested in just following their lowly desires around all day. Self gratification and everything like that. They're impossible to organize, except for maybe a few, selfies and everything like that. If they go to a protest, it's just like to show like how awesome they are rather than to actually achieve anything. Maybe only on a handful of issues like abortion or something, or whenever like George Soros tells them to cry, they'll go for that. When it comes to important issues, they're pretty lackluster. And not to say that they're this is all of the people. Like, there are people across the political spectrum in the U.S. who are sincere, who are capable, and who are, have the discipline and have the selflessness to organize around issues, but they don't get so much money as these like foundation organizations do. And honestly, the foundation money comes to subvert these causes. Like the fact that, every single original founder of the Black Lives Matter movement in Ferguson was mysteriously murdered and then replaced by these like multimillionaire, whatever those four women or whatever who are the leaders now, who are walking away with these mansions and everything like that. They're not going to achieve anything. And the same thing when it comes to bring it back to Palestine. Many of these well-funded organizations are liberal Zionist organizations. They seek to just delegitimize armed resistance and make us think that only like not buying Coca-Cola or only not buying Nestle or whatever will stop the Zionist regime. It's a complementary act. It's a very simple duty that the average person could do so they can be a part of this, but it's by itself, it's not going to work. So through the co-opting of legitimate causes by foundation money, by George Soros, the Ford Foundation, you name it, they seek to divert the tactics into things that are useless, that make us feel good but don't actually do good, and they help to, the biggest help to them is all these kind of like things that keep people dumb and docile. And just look at the speeches of Malcolm X, martyr Malcolm X, may Allah have mercy on him. Every time he mentions the oppressor, he also mentions how the system keeps people down with the bad food, with the drugs, with the alcohol, with the pharmaceutical. Yeah, maybe he wasn't hip to big pharma back in the day, but the combination of junk food, Monsanto, all these things. Like when I used to eat junk food, I would feel like my brain and my mind be so clouded. Now I can, and maybe it was the fluoride too. That's another rabbit hole we could go down into maybe another time. But it like clouds people's minds. So no wonder like it's so easy to manipulate people. So if we're able to purify our bodies and our souls from what the oppressor gives us, in order to make us easily misled, then we can easily become aware enough and disciplined enough and selfless enough in order to stand against those who wish us harm on the earth.
Most definitely. And speaking of people wishing harm on the earth and other countries, just to kind of wrap up here, brother, because I know it's we both have to head out soon. It's been a real pleasure. I want to play a clip. This is a clip about from a few days ago, Israel to hold massive military drills in simulation of an attack against Iran. Now, one thing that really bothers me about when we talk about imperialism and Zionism is also the fact that the countries and the forces that have resisted Zionism in Israel the hardest, especially in the Islamic world, in the Ummah, like Iran, like Hezbollah, like Ansar Allah, get no love, get no solidarity. Syria, right? They get no love and attention. And I feel like part of, talking earlier about the sheep and the wolf, right? Malcolm X, talking about the lesser evil or the devil with a smiley face. One of the successes of the liberal Zionist wing has been to separate the Palestine solidarity movement from Iran, from the axis of resistance, to separate it, right? They don't want Palestine solidarity activists to be in solidarity with Iran and Syria against the Wahhabis and the Free Syrian Army and all that. So I'm going to play this clip and we'll talk
thing
a
I
little bit.
want to add, if the issue of lack of solidarity, particularly in America and in the West, if it's a fear factor only, like if their heart is with it, if they understand, if it's a fear factor only, at least in the U.S., and this is not 100% legal advice, but from what I understand about the laws in the U.S., there's two things that are illegal. Number one is funding certain organizations. Number two is recruiting people to join such organizations. So as long as you're not doing those two things, you are allowed to have a political opinion in support of the Islamic resistance axis, in support of any of the organizations on the so-called terrorism list of the United States. So as long as you're not doing those two things, you are allowed to have a conscience, you're allowed to think for yourself, and you're allowed to take a moral position and support of people. So you can educate the people. Who protected the Christians in Syria? Was it the American army? No, the American government and the CIA and the Pentagon were funding the ISIS terrorists and all these other, they all have the same name or different names but the same ideology. It was Hezbollah who when nuns and monks were interviewed, they were saying, thank God for Hezbollah for protecting us, because all these American so-called Christians who sit on their hands, oh, blah, blah, Muslims, you all did nothing. It was the Islamic resistance axis that saved the real believers of Christ who are actually still speaking Aramaic to this day. Okay, these LARPers need to stay in their lane and know the truth. And if they're sincere, that they'll accept the truth and they'll correct their false understanding.
Such a great point, bro. And as Almost Christian said, ISIS equals U.S. Israel. Yeah, how interesting is it that ISIS never attacked Israel or even mentioned them? I find that kind of fascinating. But here's this clip. Again, Israel to hold massive military drill simulating attack on Iran. And we'll end off talking about the importance of solidarity, not only with Palestinian resistance, but the axis of resistance in the fight against Zionism.
Now, Israel is to hold a large-scale drill simulating a widespread strike on Iran's nuclear facilities. This drill will be the country's largest military exercise in decades. Also in a first, the United States will participate, supporting the Israeli Air Force with mid-air refueler tankers in a message of unity against Iran. Our correspondent Jody Cohen has sent us this report. Listen in.
The collaboration between Israel and the US is expected to take place over the Mediterranean Sea at the end of May as part of Israel's month-long Chariots of Fire exercise. This drill involves nearly all units of the Israel Defense Forces. The Air Force will simulate an attack on Iran's nuclear facilities, while the army trains to defend Israel against Iranian-backed Hezbollah in Lebanon. US Central Command Chief Michael Kurilla was welcomed in Israel to oversee the exercise. Speaking at Reichman University on Tuesday, Gantz warned that Iran is just a few weeks away from having enough fissile material for a bomb and is working to install 1,000 advanced centrifuges with which to enrich uranium.
Iran is making an effort to complete the manufacturing and installation of 1,000 additional advanced IR-6 centrifuges in its nuclear facilities, including new facilities being built at underground sites abutting Natanz.
I'm standing by the Azrieli Towers in Tel Aviv, which is on Iran's published list of civilian targets in Israel. Now, as part of the Chariots of Fire drill, Israel has reportedly expanded its list of Iranian military targets by 400% using artificial intelligence. The drill will simulate a strike on Iran's nuclear facilities. A real strike wouldn't be easy as the facilities are deep underground and Tehran's air defenses are becoming increasingly sophisticated. Israel would also have to contend with retaliation, both from Iran and its proxies throughout West Asia. And while the US would prefer to revive the stalled nuclear deal, its participation in the deal is a signal to Iran that time is running out. This is Jody Cohen for WION. World is One.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now.
So again, some mainstream propaganda talking points about that. But it's interesting, right? Because Israel is so focused; they're scared to the death of Iran. They are scared to death of Hezbollah, of Ansarullah. Why does Israel hate Iran so much? Hate the axis of resistance so much? And why is it important for all anti-imperialists to defend not only Palestine but the axis of resistance?
So the easiest answer is that they're the best poised to actually liberate Palestine. They have all the capabilities, and BDS is not going to do it. It's just a complementary thing that I can do as a individual, because that's just I don't have any other option to do. But when it comes to those who are actually poised to do it, that's why. But the irony is that, one, as the lady said, civilian. There's an active military occupation where everybody's part of the military occupation. There's no such thing as a civilian target, and these are conscious adults who understand what they're doing. So it's not like they don't understand what they're doing, and this is just like oh, what am I doing? Oh, I just walked into the middle of a military occupation. They know exactly what they're doing, and so accountability requires dealing with the consequences of one's actions. And another irony is that Israel has hundreds and hundreds of nuclear weapons, and they intend to use them aggressively against anybody who stands in their way. They have a thing called the Samson option. It's like nuclear blackmail for the entire world. This is real terrorism. And they're telling Iran that they can't have a peaceful nuclear energy program, so that they can actually build themselves up and have a strong, decent country where people, have cheap sources of energy, and they can have a prosperous country in a place that's surrounded by so much poverty and misery. And especially we can see this nowadays with the whole agenda by the UN and World Economic Forum to deindustrialize the global South, in the name of like climate and everything like that, Greta Thunberg or whatever. And President Putin alluded to this. He criticized Greta Thunberg like 2 or 3 years ago. The Europeans, they built themselves up on fossil fuels so they can afford to deindustrialize if they wanted to. I mean, it would still hurt them. They would still leave a lot of people in poverty, but it wouldn't be such a significant of a blow as if Lebanon was. I mean, Lebanon doesn't even have industry to begin with. It barely has electricity to begin with nowadays. So to place like, say, oh, now you can't open factories to give your people jobs when everybody's, can barely afford bread. That's, the biggest elitism. So they know that, and the leader of the Islamic Revolution has said that, nuclear energy is like the way forward for Iran to be strong, to be a part of the future industrially, because now we see that they're waging economic wars where the military wars have failed. In Lebanon, they're just like intentionally starving the people. They control the banking system in Lebanon. Most of the officials in Lebanon are just puppets of the U.S. ambassador, and they do their bidding. Totally import-dependent neoliberal economy. Like they don't even make the simplest of consumer products. And thankfully, that's like something Iran has done the opposite of. Like, for example, I have an Iranian-made cell phone. Iran has like a robust automobile industry. They have huge like industrial output. Appliances, like when Samsung and LG left the country, now they have Snow. I'm like watching TV, like all these like appliance brands are like popping up and be like, out of nowhere, and it's what's making them very strong. And now with like the financial realignment, with Russia being excluded from the global financial system, there's all these opportunities to export these and earn foreign currency reserves especially like with what President Raisi has been doing, which should have been done over the past 8 years of the liberal, like the neoliberal Rouhani government, but now it's finally being done. Like there's like all these like economic corridors set up among its neighbors, with Russia and China, and with Latin America, and you know that really like create these channels to really give some big strength to Iran's economy. So when Iran is strong, then it can adequately support the oppressed of the world. Like that's, you know, a part of the constitution of the Islamic Republic of Iran is that wherever there are oppressed people in the world, according to our definition of oppression, of course, you know, maybe the CIA-backed Western leftists will think that oppression means something else, or maybe some of these like FBI-backed, like right-winger, so-called conservatives, so-called Christians in America will also have a different definition. But for us, we have a different definition. And that enables us to support people around the world, regardless of their political affiliation, whether they're on the. I mean, these are just labels left and right for us. We're about who is on the right path, who supports righteousness, whose heart is in the right direction. If they've come to X or Y conclusion as a result of their good intentions, then you know whatever disagreements, you know, that's not important for us. You know. We can't nitpick, we can't be elitist, you know, we have to support what's best for human beings to have a decent life. And if we believe in the veracity of our Islamic ideology, then we lead by example, and if people want to follow them, that's their choice to join the movement. But there's no force in the matter, and when it comes to Iran's exports, the export is self-determination. The export is dignity. The export is a life beyond just like being a transient consumer. All these other things, and that's why Yemen loves us. That's why there's so much ties between Iran and the rest of the world, and the Zionist regime hates that. And you know they don't want people to thrive, and specifically like Iran, they like if they accuse everybody who criticizes their actions of like so-called anti-Semitic, even though people like who come from like Ashkenazi background from myself, I 0%. I'm happy to point out myself and say 0% Semitic, 100% Caucasian, of the Caucasus Mountains, which actually has a rich culture regardless of the religion that people follow, whether they were Christians or Muslims. There's a lot of Muslims in the Caucasus that actually, and they have a beautiful culture. You know, the real racial hatred is actually directed, if we want to be honest, is actually directed against the Persians. There's a holiday called Purim, which is like celebrating like Queen Esther's genocide of like Persians as like a so-called revenge against, maybe they claim that they were like concocting some plan to genocide the Jews, so they flipped the tables or something like that. And there's not even evidence that the story even historically happened in
Right.
history, but they believe it's real. And this motivates their enmity towards Iran, partially at least. Even more so that Iran is actually standing up to their racism and their oppression and everything like that. So the hypocrisy is like, it's just pure projection. The real racists are them. The real racists are them who believe like, dropping nuclear bombs on Iranian cities as a revival of what Queen Esther had started or whatever they believe in. This is the real racism is in their court. The real like plans to like drop nuclear bombs is in their courts. Iran actually believes that it's religiously impermissible to use such inhumane weapons of destruction. Now, some people like may want to think that Iran should just have them as a stockpile, like for defensive purposes, similar to like North Korea. That's a debatable. That may be something that's debatable, but the leadership, the religious leadership, has still said no, even for defensive purposes. So hopefully, the IRGC and Axis of Resistance have some secrets up their sleeves, perhaps to disable the missile launchers in the Zionist entity. Whether it be, I'm not going to mention various different technologies that could exist to do that. And I hope that they exist, and I hope new ones are continuing to be discovered, as well as the divine help and miracles that can potentially happen, that have happened during the 2006 July War, that have happened during the war against Saddam. And the reason why people should, look into Iran and take inspiration from it. You don't have to believe in our religion. You don't have to be a Shia. You don't have to be a Muslim. You don't even have to be religious. But what are our exports? Our exports are dignity, self-respect, sovereignty, being in charge of our own affairs, saying that we can choose what kind of a society we want. Secular liberal democracy is not the only choice in the world, and anything other than that is dictatorship and authoritarianism. We believe in the sanctity of women, and we believe in not parading them around as like objects for satisfaction of men in the society. We believe in all these different types of things, which actually might make some people more happier and their hearts more fulfilled. And just like we have a big graveyard here just south of Tehran called Behesht Zahra, which means the heaven of Zahra, which is the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad, who she herself is a very holy and noble personality. She's among the most holiest women in the world according to Islam, which include the Virgin Mary. So for all the Christians out there, we hold her up to that level. Actually, we honor both of them. There's like thousands and thousands. Like, you get lost in this place, and they're all people who went to the defense, not only the defense of their country, but the defense of the values that their country stands for, the defense of the oppressed. Martyrs who said, I wish I survived this war so I can go and become martyred fighting against the Zionist regime so I can help the Palestinians. Who not only fought against Saddam, but also went into Lebanon to help against the Israeli occupation, who go into Palestine secretly and go into Gaza. That's why when Qasem Soleimani was assassinated, the leader of Hamas came in and said that he's the Shaheed, the martyr of Al-Quds, of Jerusalem. When we see these people, we may see their face on the military field, but if you look into their lives and you see the way they act towards other people, it's like you want to cry. Like, their character is so beautiful. You realize what a true human being is like, and the fact that they're demonized in the media, that you're told not to look into these people, not to investigate these matters. It's honestly, that itself is a very big form of oppression. To take away these role models, like you see we consider that one of the paths to martyrdom is through the hand of your mother. There was one Lebanese martyr named Abu Zainab, and they made a movie about him. And one of the things that they noted was that every time he came home, he would kiss the hand of his mother. And these people are demonized in the Zionist media. All you see is monsters, like 100% terrorists. Like, this is a more fragrant than the most fragrant rose that you could find in the entire earth. And there's thousands of these people, and there could be movies and everything and books written about all these people, an entire culture created that actually turns people and transforms them into decent human beings. People who would never oppress somebody else. So, the system of oppression requires our participation. But if we remove the corruption from our hearts, then it's impossible for it to survive. And that's what the Islamic Republic teaches us. And that's the philosophy behind why it supports other people around the world without imposing its religious views or its political system on other people. It allows the people to have their independence as long as they are living with dignity and honor and without oppression. That's the primary concern. And so to ignore this solidarity or to write them off is you're only those who do that are only depriving themselves. So and that's addressing the genuine people. those who are intentionally trying to create this divide will maybe for 90% of them, 99% of them even, there's not much hope. They're doing this intentionally in order to prevent people from knowing this. Those who are genuine should think and reflect, and hopefully they can benefit from the example of it. And you know, I believe that the future is bright, and that the victory is going to be in the hands of Iran. And we can see that, you know, the tidal wave that is drowning the West and its hegemony around the world started on January 3rd, 2020, with the blood of Qasem Soleimani. Like everything they've been doing is backfiring. Unleash the virus, backfire. You know, commit economic suicide with maybe some of these misguided coronavirus policies, backfires, and now like the whole like global capitalist system is kind of like unwinding. They tried, and then everything they did to Russia is also backfiring. So it's like, you know, between what's going on in Ukraine and between like Qasem Soleimani, those are like the kind of like the two things that are just like pounding the very arrogant West down, and hopefully like the good-hearted people of the U.S. and the West, which Iran has aligned with people on like both on the left and so-called left and the so-called right, who are genuine and who are decent. You know, they've reached out to them, but hopefully the future is with them, because like the future of the U.S., like as the Nation of Islam leader, Minister Louis Farrakhan said, like if the U.S. doesn't like repent, it has so deep corruption, like on every level, from the political level to the social level, you name it. Like there's so much deep corruption. Like there needs to be like some deep repentance, because there's just like what they're doing is just so
satanic.
Yeah, on every level, with the poverty, with financial poverty, with people living in the streets, with the moral poverty, with people like, you know, just, you know, the average person may be so corrupted by the culture and the society, you know, that they've been raised in, that they'll sell their mother for the cheapest price. This has to change, and hopefully the decent people become like the leaders of the future. But the important thing is to purify our hearts of corruption, because if we don't, then it's just going to only be like a shift of the face who's in the seat of the throne of power. The system will be the same, and it will eventually just wind up with the same thing. So, you know, that purification is necessary. So when there is a change, it's not just in the change in the name, not just in the change of the face, but in an actual substantiative change. So hopefully Iran is like an example for that. And I think once that military hegemony is ended, as well as the financial hegemony that's being ended through the kind of making the SWIFT system and all these other types of things obsolete, I think 100% like we won't see anything known as the current system of the United States or the Zionist regime, maybe within a few years. Like I always look at like people here in Iran who've been like brainwashed by Hollywood and think like the West is just paved with gold, like everything is Beverly Hills, whereas sadly they've never seen Skid Row or some of these downtown areas that are the dredges of international finance capitalism. They're actually, even their idea may have been partially true a few years ago, but now there's not even a single truth to even the economic benefit, let alone the social corruption and everything like that. So it's like buying a ticket to the Titanic as it's sinking. So I'm, within a few years, the number one country, join or die, and they are going to die. They're going to go to the U.S. and find themselves in a worse situation economically than they are in even in Iran. They're going to find themselves in an unemployment line. And even if they do find themselves in a good situation, because let's face it, they do the whole brain drain scheme to take the most talented people from this country, give them nice jobs in like whatever highly skilled industries where they're nothing but just about a cog in the machine. The salary that they get, even if it's nice, is nothing compared to the wealth and prestige that they generate for the system of evil in the United States. Eventually, it will collapse. The U.S. dollar is going to collapse, and they're going to find themselves owning nothing and being happy, just as the World Economic Forum advocates for. Because like the testing ground for these policies, for like taking away everything from people, so that they're like entirely dependent on the capitalist system, and if they have their own political opinion, they could delete all of their digital currency. They're gonna find themselves in a horrible position, and there's actually potentially going to be a situation of actual like American refugees. Whether it be people who are like more like you want to call them moral refugees, escaping the whether they disagree with the American foreign policy or they disagree with like just like the emptiness of the consumer culture there and the materialism culture there, or people finally, when the dollar collapses, eventually people are going to realize, oh, the Titanic is sinking and it's finally over with. So there's reason to be optimistic about the future. So that's the more reason to be patient and to be resilient. No matter where in the world that we live in. And, according to our belief, we believe this is going to culminate in the divine rule of the descendant of Imam Hussein, which is the Mahdi, and also Jesus Christ as well, who will rule the world according to this divine justice, which maybe Iran and their friends are only maybe like 1%, and even at that 1%, still is a work in progress. So imagine the type of like far-reaching justice. So like every small issue you can find, there will be like a way to make it, to remove the corruption from it. So when you see cures for cancer being kept intentionally illegal by the system, censored by the system, they're going to bring them out into the surface. When you see a banking system that's like literally like blood sucking, is going to be the complete opposite, to the point where not a single person will need charity, and the Mahdi will ask, is there anybody who needs charity? And one person will raise their hand, but then upon second thought, they'll like slowly lower their hand because they'll like realize that actually they don't need it, to the point where someone can stick their hand in someone else's pocket and take money, and you'll just be like sitting drinking your tea as if please, you can think of that today. That's like impossible today. That type of generosity is impossible today, except for maybe in the annual Arba'in procession in Iraq, where people honor the martyrdom of Imam Hussein in the millions, and all the Iraqi people, despite being impoverished, give basically everything that they have to give accommodation to the people who, free like food, free medicine, free everything like that. This type of generosity, this type of viewing human life and human well-being as more important than money and all these different types of silly little things. It is possible, it can happen, and it will happen. And so all these monsters and terrorists that think that we're going to do these drills and wage war on Iran, they're finished. End of story.
Beautiful. So inspirational. We started the stream talking about something very dark and satanic, Zionism and settlers. And when we started the stream, your background, it was nighttime, it was dark. And now we're talking about what a new society looks like, where there are no poor, where we don't have usury and debt and drugs and witchcraft and all this stuff. And your background is light. The light has risen. And I think that's
a beautiful metaphor, my brother. Thank you for bringing that up.
And by the way, I'll probably take you up on the offer. I might be one of those U.S. refugees, man, because things are pretty bad out here. Someday I would love to visit Iran sometime, man. We'll go out for some delicious Iranian food if I'm ever out there. It's been a real pleasure speaking to you, bro. I would definitely love to have you back on the stream soon. Everybody who's watching, please support Basira Press. Again, we spoke with Brother Ali Salaam, editor-in-chief of Basira Press, an Islamic pro-resistance axis research and analysis site that addresses both the material and metaphysical issues of the world. Ali, it's been a real pleasure, man. I'd love to have you back on, bro. I hope all is well. Take care. Have a great week. We'll talk soon. And we're going to go out to some amazing inspirational music from the Axis of Resistance. Long live Palestine. Long live Iran. Long live the Lebanese resistance, Ansar Allah. Long live Iraq. Long live all oppressed peoples fighting against Zionism, imperialism, usury, all these horrible systems that oppress our peoples and our world. Thank you so much, everybody, and take care.
ایان سفر کرده اگر چشم تو دوری حس میکنم نگاه که نزدیک ظهوری ای نور که کعبه شده دلتنگ از آنت مردان جهادن همه منتظرانت این لشگر عشق که پر همت و عظمت اشاق همه یک به یک آماده رزمت در معرکه سنگی بگویید به صهیون آماده جنگی بگویید به صهیون در حمله ما یک اثر از دیو نماند یک خانه سالم به تل-آویو نماند یک خانه سالم به تل-آویو نماند
كلا كلا لن نركع يا شيطان لستم إلا عملاء الأمريكان كلا كلا لن نركع يا شيطان لستم إلا عملاء الأمريكان كحسين عزم وثبات برجال تصرف ويهان كحسين عزم وثبات برجال تصرف ويهان نصر حل برجالات الإيمان كلا كلا لن نركع يا شيطان نصر بيمين وجبال زفته رجال خمناء كنا كرماء كالأرض موتا أسقينا الأعداء موتا أسقينا الأعداء كلا كلا لن نركع يا شيطان لستم إلا عملاء الأمريكان الخارج بالدم عاهدنا ما كبرت غيرة واحدنا ما نرجع إلا بتابوت بعباس محلف والدنا ما نرجع إلا بتابوت بعباس محلف والدنا كلا كلا لن نرجع يا شيطان